All right, everybody. Hey, it's Lee Godbold with JRA, the marketing agency for $1 million plus junk and dumpster business owners and those that want to get there. So today's really neat because we've got a very special guest. It's somebody that I've known for a long time and who's actually played an extremely big role in especially my early days of junk removal. So back in 2011, I had just got it started. I had a pickup truck and a trailer. It was like a 2004 Ford F-150, and about the trailer, I think at that time was 6x12 with 3 foot sides on it. So it was very, very, very basic. It was not a dump. You loaded it by hand, you unloaded it by hand.
Yep.
Very early on into kind of this journey. And I was making a little bit of money, but I honestly kind of struggling a little bit in order to figure out how to grow. So I was looking for answers. And back then there was you didn't go to YouTube and listen to a million different people out there talking about how do you run a junk removal company. There really was no information out there. But what I did do is I went on the internet and I went to a forum, and I seem to remember it being like Reddit or something, but I can't remember exactly which
Yeah.
one it was. But I went out there and I just posted a question, and I kind of told people, say, hey, I've started this little junk removal company in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I've been doing it for a few months here. It's been okay, but I'm trying to figure out, how do I grow this thing? Where do I get more customers? How do I make more money doing it? And after like 2 or 3 days, I don't think anybody responded. And finally, this guy right here sends a message through and says, hey, I'd like to give you some information and kind of help you. So, and that is Zach Mefferd. So Zach is on this show right now. He had just recently sold Charlotte Junk Guys. He helped me in ways that I didn't even really realize at the time. Just like immediately, we were getting great feedback, great information from him. And honestly, I can say that junk doctors, JRA, especially truck bodies, all the stuff that we've built within this junk removal industry, I really can't say with any degree of certainty if it wasn't for this guy, if any of that stuff would have happened, because it's possible that I wouldn't have stuck with it. I'd have gone on to something else. So who knows? But there's a lot of employees and a lot of clients, and obviously me, very glad that we did find each other through that internet forum because we've been able to do some really kind of cool things. So, Zach, great to have you on. I'm going to enjoy speaking with you on this. This isn't just a story necessarily about junk removal. Zach's had a hell of a journey since owning a junk removal company. He's built and sold businesses, transitioned into a completely different industry within insurance, and still finds some time here and there to race some cars, which is another commonality that he and I have. So, we're going to dig into all this today. So, Zach, welcome to the show.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me, man. I don't, wow, what an intro. I appreciate it very much. And I'm super excited to be here. This is some of my fondest memories of my entrepreneurial journey and getting to it. And I guess I didn't realize it was that much of an impact, man. So I'm glad that it felt that way. I just was as excited as you probably were to find somebody else that was in the trenches trying to figure out the business when I was. Because I mean, coincidentally, even though I found you on that forum, I was trying to think of the same thing. If it wasn't Reddit, it was like an early version of a Reddit.
Right.
Because I remember just Googling it and finding it because I was researching things for my business. And although I'm not from the North Carolina area at the time, I mean, I was only a couple hours from you down in Charlotte. So kind of just odd timing. And maybe it's not a coincidence that it happened, but happy to be here, excited to get into this and kind of reminisce, man. That's like I said, I love talking shop, and it's fun to think back about all the things that were then and what's happened since. So
it's definitely, it's not, I haven't really thought about the fact necessarily until I was kind of putting this together on how things might have turned out had we not connected. But again, I had tried a couple businesses prior to this, so I think that information really, really helped because I mean, immediately there was things that I implemented where I could make more money. And I kind of took it from there and ran with it and did some neat things. But you're definitely instrumental in kind of putting helping
and
together.
Yeah, I'll say too, man. Like I'm super proud of you and seeing what you've built this out to be. I mean, I've been admiring it from afar for 13 years now.
Right.
I mean, seeing all the stuff you've done. I mean, the aspirations that I had as an entrepreneur, although they focus to a different industry, really what you've done and how you've done it is very in line with what I had as far as a vision for what I want to do, and just the world worked out in a different way where I was able to do some cool stuff in different industries. But again, super proud of you and what you've done. And I've been watching and admiring for like I said, like what, 13 years now. Wow. It seems like just yesterday that happened, though.
It really does. It's hard to believe it's been 13 years. So before we kind of dive into junk removal sort of specific stuff, tell us a little bit about your background. I'm kind of curious, and honestly, I know a little bit of this, but I don't know maybe the entire story or much of it. So where'd you grow up? What got you into the business in the first place?
Yep. So born and raised in Iowa, a little town called Missouri Valley, just outside of Omaha, Council Bluffs. I've been what I consider myself an entrepreneur since I was a kid. I mean, my mom tells stories still where I was finding things. I guess it was guard bugs at first and firewood. Like I would just rummage around my town, find things, and then go door to door to sell. Iowa also has a can deposit where it's 5 cents for every can that you bring in. So I used to ride my bike around town and just get bags full of cans and bottles and take them to the grocery store to get money. So I just always have been just wired that way. I mean, I feel like that's a God-given gift that I just have been an entrepreneur and wanted to do it. I had a sports card shop as a kid. I did a door-to-door sales program called something Sellers Club. I just looked this up like a month ago. Anyway, like Top Performers Club or Top Sellers Club, something like that. Yep. So I've always just been a hustler. I just wanted to do that. And, I think I had a lot of influence from, my dad and my uncle, which are going to be a part of this story, and, hearing them and their frustrations of being an employee and always wanting to own their own business and never really doing it. And I think that probably had a big impact on me. But yeah, born and raised in Iowa. I went to Iowa State University, which is going to be a part of this story as well, kind of telling you how I got to Charlotte, where I met my then girlfriend turned ex-girlfriend, now wife. But after one of those breakups is how I ended up in Charlotte. So as you know, we both have an affinity for racing. I grew up racing.
I don't know if it's an affinity or an affliction. It's one or the other, but yeah.
Addiction, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, it's a problem for sure. But yeah, so I mean, growing up, just always was hustler. Always wanted to do those things, and grew up racing. After college, like I said, the girlfriend and I broke up, and I was at a point in my life where I feel like I wasn't super happy with where I was working. I was working for a great company, but I just didn't want to do the corporate game. And I was 26, almost 27 at that time. I figured if I'm ever going to go try something completely crazy, I didn't have any wife, kids, that was the time. So I don't know if I ever told you this, but when I went down to North Carolina, when I quit my job, I literally sold. And when I say literally, I mean, I literally sold everything that did not fit in my 1997 Chevy Malibu.
Yep.
And it was packed to the gills. And I drove, 16, 17 hours from Iowa to North Carolina. I didn't know where I was going to work. I didn't know where I was going to live. I was just, trusting that I'd figure it out and that God would take care of me. And and it worked out. So that's how I got to North Carolina. That's kind of where this whole story starts.
Why did you make the trip down to North Carolina?
So I've always wanted to take that next step in racing, and I had a little bit of money saved, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to get into, but at the time I was following a lot of these guys that were up and coming, were racing legend cars.
Yep.
And although we do have them now at one track in Iowa, maybe two, the legend cars just seemed like a good place to get seen. And they had we had visited a couple of times with the summer shootout series. I figured if I could muster up enough money just to get in one of those, because they had a rapid drive programs, in teams. So my plan was to go down there, get settled, keep the money flowing a little bit, and then just start racing.
Yep.
That didn't work out exactly as planned, but that was my idea. So I wanted to do that. And I also was at first very much seeking out a job in motorsports marketing. I wanted to sell sponsorship for the teams, and get into it. And I found out very quickly that the people that had the jobs I wanted were either, working for free as an internship, or they were, some family member got them in, and just, I didn't have the network,
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
So how much racing were you actually able to do when you made it down here?
I didn't race a single thing down there, Lee. That's one of my biggest regrets about being down there. I mean, I went to them. Yeah. I started getting into it, but I was balancing this whole thing of I remember talking to I ended up stopping at a Starbucks as soon as I got to Concord, and I met this group, and I just started talking to people to make connections. And it was just, again, it was one of those things that's not, I don't feel like it's a coincidence. They didn't believe me at first till they saw my car and saw everything that was in there. And I was staying at a little motel across the street.
Yeah.
And one of the guys that's part of this, it was a church group. And one of the guys that was a part of it had moved down there from Wisconsin and was a motocross racer, and it worked for a dyno company. and he had a big house and like 3 empty rooms. And so that's how I ended up figuring out, my place to stay. I found a place to stay within like a week.
Yep.
But I remember telling him, I was like, man, it was a couple months in. I was like, I'm just hemorrhaging cash because I didn't have a job.
Yep.
I was driving around Mooresville and Concord, with my resume, knocking on doors, trying to get in. And it just got to a point where it's like I had to be careful with my money. Like I didn't want to throw it into racing and then not have a place to live.
Yeah. Yeah. So your back's kind of up against the wall here. You're starting to run out of money. Hadn't found a job at this point. So how did you dream up kind of junk removal?
Yeah. All right. So the same group of people kind of took me in as this like poor little orphan. Right. And they invited me to the church and whatnot, started hanging out with them. And I met some pretty cool people that I'm still friends with to this day. And but at first I just I needed a job. Right. And so and everybody took this whole thing as like, well, he likes racing, he likes cars, he must be mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really bad assumption to make if somebody likes racing. I'm fairly mechanical and mechanically inclined. This is, again, like you said before, YouTube, where you can look up a video. If I can see someone do it, I can do it, but I'm not like a guy that can just tear something apart and put it back together.
Right.
There's a guy at the church that was looking to hire somebody he had an auto, he focused on DSM cars where you would, as a dismantler, like a junkyard.
Yeah.
But he had a real small shop because he had just transitioned into his business.
Yep.
So he hired me probably as more of a charity case for $10 an hour to help him pull parts on these cars. And so I started doing that. And that's where this whole junk thing came into play. So he's moving from this little warehouse he had in Concord out to what is now still his salvage yard outside of Kannapolis.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got into that whole, property, we had to do a massive clean out, like massive.
Yep.
And so I was, as he is quick to remind me, probably one of the worst dismantlers he's ever had. He's like, you weren't a bad kid. You were really slow at, getting things pulled apart and always had questions. And he's just like, it wasn't a good role for you. So I'm going back and forth to the scrapyard. And at the time I'm pretty frustrated with them because they're packing a bunch of stuff that's not metal into these cars and these trailer loads I'm taking for them to the dismantler. And the light bulb just kind of went off, because I told myself I was going to start a business down there if I couldn't find a job.
Yep.
And one of the things you might not know about my story is that my dad and uncle, the ones I was telling you about here earlier, that wanted to get into something, they had actually looked into buying the 1-800-GOT-JUNK franchise.
Oh, really?
For Omaha and Des Moines. And my uncle was going to run Des Moines. My dad was going to run Omaha. That was the plan.
Yep.
And I remember them not qualifying because of their background of, whether it was probably a mix of net worth and sales or whatever it was that they were looking for at the time. But I'm taking these loads back and forth and thinking to myself, I could put up ads somewhere and go do this all day long and be a lot happier and working for myself, probably make more money than I could if I were, just doing it for these guys and trying to dismantle cars because I'm just really not that good at it.
Yeah.
And that was where the idea came from. I was researching a lot of service-based businesses. I know you had done a couple of those before. But I figured, what had the lowest barrier to entry? What could I get into and do without a lot of money and get into it? And much like you, when I came up with the idea, at the time I was thinking SEO stuff, right? Because I had a roommate that was just a total nerd about it.
Yep.
So that's why I picked the name, because I figured if someone was going to search Charlotte junk removal, Charlotte Junk Guys would be a faster way to rank,
Yeah. Yeah.
I bought I think it was 2001 Ford F-150, 5-speed, 6-cylinder. And I think the website's still up there. I don't think they've ever changed it. It still shows my 6x12 trailer, just like you, with boards on it. I loaded everything up by hand, took it off by hand. I remember sitting at certain dumps and seeing these guys at dump trailers and being like, oh, God, man, wouldn't that be nice to have?
Yep.
And seeking out NPRs to try to figure out how I could afford one of those so I could do it like the big guys. And yeah, that's where the idea came from, was out of necessity and just, something I figured I could do.
Excellent. When you first got it started, how did you initially get your first jobs?
Yeah. So the very first jobs that I got before I discovered what I know we're going to get into with the Google stuff is I was going out and trying to figure out, I tried to think of people that might need recurring, pickups, right? Like, so I was going around a bunch of storage units. I was putting up flyers in every single gas station and I hadn't figured out how to do those, like, what do they call them? Those yard signs quite yet. I wasn't quite into that, but I had flyers that were built up, and I was just going around and literally door knocking anywhere I thought that they might have a need to have something removed. And, and the group of the church, they had some connections to different people that were helping me get my name out too with other businesses. So that's how I started. But again, going back to the kid that was a total nerd about this SEO and this pay-per-click deal, he introduced me to the Google ad idea. These ads that you could buy. Man, I'm telling you, that's where I think you and I got connected on, at least initially, as we started. Once I figured out how to do that, and again, it's so much different nowadays than it was then, but it didn't take long. I mean, it was a lot of A/B testing, trial and error, but it didn't take long before I was getting, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. I mean, it probably was 3 weeks, honestly, Lee, before I was door knocking to where I figured that part out.
Well, I know when we first spoke, and like I said, this was probably 2011, you got me started on Google Ads, and it was probably the same day. I mean, at that time, I was getting all my work off Craigslist. So literally 6 or 8 times a day, I was posting on Craigslist. You would always repost. That way you were back up top. And back then it was free. I think I was still posting on Craigslist. They started charging like $5 per post or something like that. And I was still posting like 6 or 8 times a day, just kind of always stay up top. And that's how it really got the business started. But as you know, Craigslist, I don't even think it's really all that relevant at all now. But back then, you got some decent jobs, but a lot of them were really price shoppers.
You're not wrong. And I honestly, I completely forgot about it. I was doing that as well. I was doing Craigslist because there wasn't like the home-based service websites out there like there are now. There weren't the Facebook groups or anything like that were going on. So I was doing Craigslist, and you're right. It wasn't even just the amount of leads, but the quality of the lead was significantly lower than before I figured out the Google ad stuff. Like, I mean, that changed it literally overnight.
Yeah. Yeah. And early on with Google ads, what was great is it was actually extremely profitable because like cost per clicks. And I think when we first started, cost per clicks were $2, $2.50, $3. And I mean, that's like putting you like up top. So it seems like, and this is going back, I think when I first set it up, you said, hey, set it at $20 a day, which you can't even begin to sniff doing Google ads at $20 a day. And I think I set it at $20 a day, and like the first 2 or 3 days got like, 2, 3, 5 jobs, something like that. It was significant. And I'm like, wow, this is working. So it quickly went from $20 a day to $50 a day to 70 to 100 to eventually, 500 to 1,000 a day. This is over several years. So, and the business.
Well, that was part of my A/B testing, though.
Yeah.
Sorry, you broke up on me there. What was that?
Well, that was just, that time frame, just raising up the spend was like just turning on the faucet for more jobs. And that's how we grew a really profitable business pretty fast, was off ads.
Yeah. And Leah, for me, like I said, it goes back to A/B testing. The reason $20 made sense for me is I could only take on so many jobs because I didn't have a reliable work source to help me do these, right? I had 2 or 3 part-time guys that were helping me. So if I ended up booking 5 jobs in a day, which was, you could get 5 jobs off $20 ad spend back then.
Yeah.
And so that was enough for me. So I didn't want to spend any more than I had to get those. And I'm sure I probably raised it up a little bit more than that, but I know I didn't need to do too much to keep that phone ringing. And so, yeah, I mean, I could have done more, but I didn't have the guys to help me.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. What do you think you might have done differently on your junk removal company? Have you ever thought back and said, hey, had I done, these things differently, things might have, happened in a different order, maybe I'd still be in it? Or were you just kind of ready to move on and kind of continue on with what your vision is?
I was never ready to move on. And so I still have such a love and affinity for this. Like, I love it. And I've since used guys that are within your network locally here to help me on my clean outs and the moves that I had. I think the thing that I wish, if I could have changed anything, I would have gotten to a different truck much faster.
Really?
I was nervous back then because I was a young, dumb kid that didn't really know. And looking back on it, man, I'm just so thankful for that process and those times. I learned so much that I even use today, about, I think it's even more of in retrospect, it's more of an appreciation for the things that, I learned then and it's been able to use. So I had to learn kind of the hard way. That's just the way I'm wired. But I think if I were to make one change, other than getting good quality work source and spending more on the Google ads to get those things going, it would have been getting into a bigger truck with a dump right away. There's nothing stopping me but myself from, financing an NPR with a dump and just doing it the right way. I could have been so much more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah. What year did you start Charlotte Junk, guys?
So I was only down in Charlotte for I want to say 13 months.
Okay.
So I started it in 2011.
Yep.
So I had to be right at the same time as you, or a couple months before you. I don't know, right around there.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't too long after, when that's why I was looking up stuff at the time and I found you. So yeah, I was only there for a year, and it was 2011. I left. It would have been right at the end of. I'm trying to get my years right. It was in 2012, because then I moved up to. I was the reason why the girlfriend and I broke up. And if we were going to try to make it, like I said, she's my wife now, so it worked out. But yeah, she's the only reason I left Charlotte. I actually brought her down. I flew to Iowa and drove her all the way back down and tried to convince her that, hey, after college, come down here. This is where you need to stay. I really want to, keep growing this business. And my idea was to franchise it. That's exactly what I wanted to do. And I probably would have if she would have moved to Charlotte, but I couldn't convince her.
I understand. So what do you have going on now?
So I've transitioned. So when I got to Chicago, I told myself, and to tell you how much I love the industry, when I sold Charlotte Junk Guys, I had bought the domain Junk Removal Fast and Snow Removal Fast, because I know it's snowing behind you right now, but typically there's not a lot of snow in North Carolina. And I had done some overnight stints with a couple lawn care companies just as a contractor when I was in junior college. I told myself, I wanted to have another type of business that I could help, supplement some of the stuff we were doing. And at that time, I was still thinking about, there's a different franchise out there. I don't know if they're still around, but it was Been There, Dump That. That was
mini bins. Yeah, they're a decent size now. They're kind of all throughout the country. Yeah.
Well, so in my mind, what I was going to do to grow this was to offer full service and self-service, because I had a sponsor in one of my race cars that had a roll-off company.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, if I did full service, self-service, and then I also did some snow removal, as we good. So I wanted to keep doing that. So when I moved to Chicago, I was still trying to figure things out, but I needed to get a job immediately, because I then was with my girlfriend and didn't want to have to start all over again. So I told myself I was going to get into an industry that I could learn, and if that didn't work out, that I would be able to replicate it and start my own business. So I searched for either 3PL logistics, which was transportation logistics, book and freight, headhunting, and then insurance. Those are the three things I narrowed down to what I wanted to do. And I just happened to get hired into the insurance industry first, but it was, in my mind at that time, it was a temporary deal, right? And it's kind of a joke in the insurance space. Like, once you get in, you can't get out. I don't know if it's true for everybody. It definitely has been for me. So started my insurance career there, and then girlfriend became wife, and then we wanted to start a family. And so I had to keep going. I hadn't given up on being an entrepreneur, but I was not at a point where I felt like I could take the risk in doing it. And I still had to work up to it. So I ended up working for a couple different places for a few years. And then in 2016, I finally convinced my former business partner to leave the really great company that we worked for. I mean, it's hands down the best company I'd ever worked for, but I knew that I wasn't going to do anything other than work for somebody else for the rest of my life, and I just wasn't going to do that. So convinced my wife to let me take the risk, and he and I started a scratch independent insurance agency in 2016. From there, we found a affinity partner. We partnered with the fourth largest credit union in Iowa to create an insurance agency for them, while at the same time taking on an investment to create a technology platform. Prior through college, I worked for a cell phone company, and I just love tech. That's something that's just always been something I've been interested in. It's not like I build my own computers or anything, but I'm just fascinated by the efficiencies that are created by technology. So we created a tech platform, and has since sold the book of business to that credit union. I still am somewhat a part of the tech platform for credit unions that we created on the insurance side. And then, as a lot of people, I was bored during COVID. I've had this tech kind of background now, and I started looking for another, pain point that I had and trying to find another opportunity. And there is a niche type of insurance called surety bonds, which is mostly working with contractors. There's all sorts of types, but my biggest frustration as an insurance producer turned owner was that I didn't do enough bonds to do them really well, and I didn't have enough access to markets to do it. And every time I tried to find somebody that could help be my subject matter expert, I could never find it. So in 2020, I put together a pitch deck and went out with my tin cup trying to find some money for it. And we raised a little bit of money in 2021 and launched Zip Bonds, which is my primary business and what I do, which is, again, specialty insurance, surety bonds. We started that in June 21 and have successfully grown it rapidly over the last 3.5 years.
What a great story. I'm curious because this is a pretty common story for junk removal, well, business owners in general, but people looking to get in junk removal. Many of them have had a job. They've had multiple jobs over time. They've always been an employee, and they're nervous to really make that jump. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. But before we jump into that, did you have kids at this point in 2016, or did they come later?
Yeah. So in 2016, we had our first. We weren't planning on having our second, but I'll never forget this because it was April 14th, day before tax day, is when we got walked out the door, and we officially opened. I think it was the Monday was May 2nd, and then May 4th, because May the 4th be with you. I'm not a Star Wars guy, but I always remember that.
Yep.
That my wife called me, and I'm still putting together office furniture. That's how new we were.
Yep.
And I could tell something was wrong. And my first inclination was oh, what did I do wrong? I was trying to think of did I do something, because why would she be so, not hysterical, but she was definitely, if you knew my wife, she's very reserved, very calm. And I could tell something was wrong. She said she had to see me. It was important that she did it in person. So it's okay, I guess. I'm still putting together these chairs, but I'll try to make time. And that's when she let me know that we had baby 2 on the way.
Wow.
Which was a huge sigh of relief because at that time I was I didn't screw something up. So that was good for me.
Yeah.
And 2, it was man, I got another, 7.5 months to figure this out. I got all the stress in the world right now. This is the last thing that I'm worried about. All I want is a healthy baby. I don't really care about that. I knew I could figure it out, but yeah, I had kids and that definitely, it's more stressful, but it's honestly a better motivator too. You can't let them down. You got to figure it out.
It's funny when you were just brought that up. I just jotted a note down. I wanted to talk to you about that. So about how kids actually affected your performance and your business. So a lot of people hesitate to have kids until they're ready, until
Yep.
they're financially ready or whatever. My experience has been, now I did well when I was single, but once I had kids, the level of focus and honestly, the level of aggressiveness went up too, which sometimes people become a lot more conservative. But on my end, I tried to keep the aggressiveness up and actually increase it while still just making sure I was smart and not going to kind of screw us up where, where you would let your kid down or let your kids down, let your family down or whatever. So I got on this whole thing. It's man, if I want to create this kind of dream that I have in my head of what my family and what my life is going to look like I've got to get on it right now because I've got these kids and I don't want to let them down and I want them to be able to experience things that I wasn't necessarily able to experience growing up. What were your thoughts when you had a kid, when you've got your own business, you went out on your own, you already had one kid, you find out you have a second one going? In terms of work or just anything in general, what crossed your mind at that point? And then what did you do, moving forward from when that happened?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess it's a couple things that really stood out to me. So first, you talk about creating this life that you want to be able to have and whatnot. And I'm not ashamed to admit that I grew up, so the group that I hung out with, I was definitely a bit of an outsider. We weren't dirt poor or anything. We did okay, but I could see some of these kids had different lives and different lifestyles. And I definitely, I wanted it, And so when I thought about the life I wanted to create, that was a big motivator for me. But it also is, because it's a huge gamble and it's risky and it's hard to do. And there's a couple things that stood out to me. One is just I always in the back of my mind hearing my dad and my uncle for years and years and years talk about how he just complaining basically about having to work for somebody else, not being able to control their own destiny, and knowing that they're smart, capable people, and they were then and they are now. And they, for whatever reason, just created their own roadblocks to be able to do it. And I didn't want that to be me. I had nothing against, them making their decisions for whatever they did, but for me, that just wasn't going to be what I wanted. I wanted to do it for myself. And I also, I figured if I failed, at least I tried. I didn't want to look at myself and say, hey, I wish I would have tried this and that. But it's coincidentally, my father-in-law, I really hit the in-law jackpot when with the family I'm married into. But he was an entrepreneur, sweat equity deal where he earned his way into owning part of this company. And I remember talking to him, and it was so profound. And he probably doesn't ever get the credit he deserves or care to. But to anybody thinking about starting a business, that back and forth, he said something to me that I remember to this day, and I'll never forget. He goes, Zach, when I made the decision to go out and do this on my own with this guy and take this risk, I looked at it as there's two options. There's risk if you stay, and there's risk if you go. And both of them have risks, and the reason why it was so profound is because that company that was the best company I'd ever worked for, the agency that I worked for, it was sold twice in the first 3 years of me starting Coverage Direct. And so somebody else would have been planning my destiny.
Yep.
And I would have, the risk I would have, at the time would have been felt safer, actually would have been more volatile if I would have stayed. Yep. And so the risk if I go is worst case scenario, I fail miserably and I go pick up a job selling insurance for somebody else. To me, it was just like, it was one of those deals where I had to at least try. And if I failed, I was just going to be able to live with the fact that I did and move forward. It was the same thing when I started Charlie Junk Guys. At that time, I didn't have all the stress and pressure, but at the same time, it would have been humiliating to move halfway across the country and come back with my tail between my legs, doing that. That was a driver for me. I didn't want to do that. But, there's risk if you stay too. I mean, you live with regret, you live with somebody else controlling your destiny and your income. And that wasn't for me. So those are probably the two things that had the biggest impact on me.
I'm curious, you mentioned that you were able to convince your wife. How did you approach that? Because, people with spouses and husbands, wives, whatever, and they're looking to go out on their own, that can either be a positive or a negative type deal. And there's a lot of businesses that never start because maybe the spouse of the individual that wants to start one is just super, super conservative, kind of worrisome and just kind of nervous. Is your wife naturally a conservative person? And how did you go about kind of convincing her to let you go out and start on your own?
Yep. So that another great question. And I've talked about this in length at other, podcasts or presentations that I've done. My mom instilled me from a very young age that, you have to be really, really careful and very intentional on who you marry, because that partner is a partner for life. And that person has to be on the same page on a bunch of different things. I mean, she beat that into my head as a kid, and I'm thankful for it now. It was kind of annoying at the time, but I get it now. And I think that's true not only for the partner you choose for life, but also if you're getting into business with somebody, you have to make sure that partner, because it is kind of like a marriage, right? Like when you get into this and figuring out it's the right person. Mm-hmm. When I left Charlotte and came up there and sold Charlotte Junk Guys, we were very clear on a few things before we moved forward to eventually get married. One, and it's 90% of the reason why I wanted to marry her, it was really important for her to be a mom. She wanted to be a mom, and I wanted to marry a woman that wanted to be a mom. And it's still important to us to this day. But she knew that going into this, and I think it kind of helps. There's the saying in Iowa, if you want to be a farmer, you marry a farmer's daughter for a reason, right? Because they understand the lifestyle and what happens there. Well, I feel like having married a entrepreneur's daughter, she understood the transition, the embracing the suck, as I call it, for a little bit, and then what it looks like afterwards if you're successful. But there wasn't much, to your question, much of a conversation. She knew I was going to want to be an entrepreneur again, and I cannot tell you how much. It was almost to the point I was like, she believes in me too much. It's because I kind of had to hide how scared I was at times when I was doing things, because she always just believed that I was going to figure it out and I was going to do it. And she's been my biggest, fan and advocate. So I got really lucky in that case. But again, it was because my mom beat that on my head and it was intentional. And we did talk about it. She knew I wanted to do that. And she knew I was going to eventually go out on my own. So when it was time, we agreed that it was time. And she just, man, the stuff she had to go through the first couple of years, though, I'm not trying to make light of it. It wasn't easy. And especially with a young kid and another one on the way. I mean, she lived a very solo life for the first couple of years, because I was working early in the morning till late at night, weekends. I was doing everything I had to make sure I set us up to be successful.
Yeah. And that commitment, it's tough to get that work-life balance. And honestly, I haven't been very good at it. What I found is at the times where I've maybe cut back the amount that I work, issues start kind of popping up. So And I've done a pretty good job building businesses and all, but I don't think I've built one to the size where it needs to get to yet to maybe have some sort of level of freedom. And I've also, part of me wonders if you should just build one up and you get to the point, if you want to cut back, you should sell it and truly cut back. But
Yeah.
that's maybe a kind of a separate conversation. So, it's interesting. My wife is a huge supporter of mine. We've got a great relationship. We got 3 kids now.
Yeah.
We make time. I always make time for a date night every week, and I always make sure I can spend at least some time with the kids and all in the evening every single day, unless I'm traveling, and then it's on FaceTime, whatever like that. Like, I'm very intentional in making sure that I get those things done, but I'm still working 10 to 12 hour days pretty consistently, 5 days a week, and about 4 hours every single Saturday. So it's a lot of time that's still being put in, and she's very, very supportive. She doesn't want me really talking a whole lot about work stuff and growth plans and any risks that we might want to take, because on our side, on the business side, there's some acquisitions that we want to start making, and it's relatively expensive, and it will involve taking out some debt to be able to do that. Is your wife somebody where you go home and you talk through this stuff with it, or would she rather not really know about it?
So I'll tell you, at first, it was that way. I'd come home and I'd talk about it.
Yep.
Until we had a, coming to Jesus moment, if you will, about, hey, this is all you talk about anymore. This is all it is. And like, I love you and I support you, and I want to be, here to help you and be involved and whatnot. But like, you gotta like talk about something else, and you gotta, focus on us too, And so from that point, and it obviously was a big point in our relationship, because I remember it very, very vividly. I don't anymore talk about those things. I turn that part of my brain off as best I can, and try to focus on the things that help build our relationship and, my relationship with my kids. But I do, we kind of have an understanding now, though, there's like, because I'm in the similar position. I'm considering an acquisition right now, and it's one of those things where it's going to impact us personally, financially, in a way that, she needs to be involved with it. And so when I do have to have those conversations, I let her know. We make sure it's the right time. Phones are away. We sit down, we talk about it and go through it. And the thing I like about that is, when being intentional about that, she has these, Dave Ramsey talk about, like, his wife has a feeling, right? Has a feeling about something. Yeah. I have learned to trust my wife's feelings about whatever. If she doesn't feel right about it, even if she can't conceptualize why, I listen, because she just has this sense about things that just, and it's burned me a couple of times for not doing it. Yeah. But she's been just, like, again, she's just an outstanding partner, and it helps me with those things. But we don't have those conversations unless it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I really need your opinion on this, and she knows it, and we're both dialed in and get through it. And they usually don't even last that long, because within a few conversation or a few minutes in the conversation, she's kind of got her idea, and it's either, hey, I trust you, I think you're going to make the right decision, and nothing about this worries me, or this, I don't like this part of it, and I don't think you should do it, or I think you should at least do some more research before you do.
Great. That's great. So what do you do? You got 2 kids now, right? Still 2?
Yep.
2 daughters, correct?
Yep. Got 2 girls.
Yep, 2 girls. And what ages are they?
10 and 8.
So how do you balance your work responsibilities with your family responsibilities? We talked a little bit about the conversations and all that you have with your wife, and you're not really focusing and discussing work-related stuff very often. But how do you manage the 2 daughters and balance your work life as well?
Yep. So a couple things. I'm home every night. Like I said, like you said, sorry, when I'm not traveling, I do everything in my power to not travel any more than I absolutely have to. And any opportunity I get to travel, I try to find a way to incorporate either my wife coming with me or my kids coming with me. And I've been very fortunate in being able to do that. But I have limited the amounts of travel that, I was traveling probably, at least once, if not twice a month, the first couple of years. And now I think this year I might travel for work 4 times. So that's one, is just one of those things where I want to be home. I want to have that consistency and that safe place for our kids. Other things that we do very intentional about, I get the opportunity to, and I love getting to take my kids, like on Wednesdays, this morning, I take them to school in the morning. They're part of a classical academy, so it's a hybrid. So there's only 2 full days that they go to. And my wife volunteers at the school on Monday, so she takes them Monday, and then I take them Wednesday. And then I leave a little early, which I'll probably get right after this, I go pick them up from dance, and try to be a part of those types of connections. The other thing I do, we have a tradition now that we started. One of my buddies, I borrowed it from him. Every Saturday morning, we do what's called Dum Dum Saturday, which is short for donuts. My youngest couldn't say donuts. She called them Dum Dum, so we still call it Dum Dum Saturday. And every Saturday, I take my kids to breakfast. I let my wife sleep in, and that's our time. So we talk about things, we hang out. We usually go to like Target or something to pick up whatever they want to do. Like that's my time with them. I don't waver from it. I don't think I've missed a Dum Dum Saturday outside of like a fishing trip. We've been doing it for like 6 years now. I just don't miss it. We're on vacation. It's still Dum Dum Saturday. It doesn't matter. We're going.
Love it. So you've definitely built up a routine and kind of some traditions.
Yep. Yeah, the traditions are big to me. I didn't have a whole lot of those growing up. I mean, it just wasn't a part of our, family nomenclature, whatever you want to call it. Like it just wasn't what we did, and that was really important. I like that consistency. I like getting in a routine, and I like, knowing what to expect. And so that's just something. I mean, it's not even like a question anymore. We just know it's Dum Dum Saturday. That's what we're gonna do. And so every Saturday we do that, and it's been great.
What would you tell somebody if they were in kind of your shoes? Maybe they've been working for somebody else for a while. They'd always thought about starting a job. They had a kid, maybe a couple kids, maybe a kid on the way, kind of like you did, or at least right after you started. And they're thinking about starting their own business. Maybe it's a junk removal and a dumpster rental company. What words of advice would you give them?
I go back to what my father-in-law said. There's risk if you stay and there's risk if you go. And I'm not going to make it. It's not all rainbows and butterflies. Like I intentionally use the phrase, you got to embrace the suck. Yep. And for me, in my space, I had he wasn't even really a mentor. He was a agent that I worked for that I was telling him I wanted to go out on my own and eventually wanted to build this up. And he goes, Zach, for the first 3 years, you just got to struggle through and survive. He goes, you get to year 5, you're going to feel, like comfortable, and maybe you can pay yourself finally what you're worth. And by the time you get to year 7, you're going to be like, this is the best thing I ever did. And I think, what makes an entrepreneur in my mind, the one thing that you just, no matter your background, your financial status, industry, doesn't matter. You have to have grit. And if you don't have it, you probably shouldn't do it. Because you have to just grind it out every single, especially in the beginning. And you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to know what's going to, the right way to do it. But in doing it the hard way like that, thankfully there are guys like you that can help out and advise and, help navigate some of the earliest mistakes that I wish I would have had when I did it. But, you're still going to make mistakes. You just got to learn to live with it and just move on,
So you being a bona fide business owner, you've owned several businesses, you've done really, really well. I'm guessing you have absolutely no self-doubt at all. You never doubt the decision you make. Is that right?
He said facetiously, yeah, man, there are days that I'll wake up and I'll be like, I can't believe I have all this responsibility. I remember I showed my mom, this is like our last team photo that we did. It's time I want to say we had like 20 employees total. And, she's like, Zach, I'm just so proud of you. Look at what you built. It's so great. And I said, no, Mom, when I look at that photo, I kind of want to throw up. Like, I think about all the responsibility I have and all these people whose livelihoods depend on me not screwing things up and making sure that I continue to drive and build this. And so there's definitely times where there's self-doubt, and it's one of those things that I won't say it's a coping mechanism, but a couple of things. First, my faith obviously has really helped me be able to be comfortable with the fact that, I'm not really in control of anything anyway. So whatever happens is going to happen. So I've come to peace with that. But the other part is just like, I have to remind myself that even in the worst case scenarios, situations I've been in, I've always been able to figure it out. Even if it isn't what I thought it was going to be, it's hard to beat somebody who doesn't quit. And that's my mentality. But those don't ever go away. I don't think even Elon Musk doesn't have those days where he wakes up and he's got all the money in the world, So you just got to learn to live with it.
I love it. Learn to live with it, because that's, I've never actually put it like that, but what I've learned is when that pops up that's when you got to think about stuff logically. And if the logic makes sense, you just got to find a way. Like, it almost feels like I physically take whatever that doubt is at that moment. And this is like a split second nowadays. I don't let it sneak in often, but when it sneaks in, like, I recognize it and I take just a few seconds, or maybe it's a few minutes potentially. I verify the logic, and then it's like I pick up that self-doubt and I go like stick it under my desk or something.
Over there.
And just put it behind you and just not think about it. And what I found is do your best not to think about it, and do your best to take emotion out of decisions, both the worry as well as getting too excited. It's very easy to, I'm a naturally positive person,
Yep.
and it's very easy to ignore the warning signs you've got, or as your wife says, or Dave Ramsey says, the feelings or whatever.
Yep.
It's
Right.
very easy to ignore that and focus on the positives, and that's not good. And then it's also some people, and it's sometimes even positive people, will focus on the negatives, and you can't really do that. You have to be able to look at things really logical, and it sounds like you've done a really good job with that as well. And that's something that early on I struggled with, but I've gotten much better at as.
But to that point, Lee, it's learned, right? Like, I wasn't very good at it, and I'd still say that it sounds like you probably have a better handle on it than I do. I mean, it is a learned process, and it is something you have to be intentional about, and it's something you really have to focus on. And like I said, it was a coping mechanism, right? Like I just figured out a way to cope with it, which you say, like, put it off to the side. But it's still there. It pops up every now and then, and it's learned. It's like anything, it's like exercising a muscle. You get better at it over time. But I would hate for somebody to not stick out their business and starting it because they let that win. Like, I mean, that to me is just, I really feel for those people, because that's something you're going to get through one way or the other. You just gotta, again, it's grit. You gotta just push through. You can't let it win. But again, like, it's not like it ever goes away. I mean, there's still those times that those things happen, and like you said, you just gotta know you can figure it out and push through.
Consistency. You show up to work every single day, no matter how good stuff's going or no matter how poor stuff's going. You show up and you look at, prioritize what you have in front of you, and you might have a whole mountain of stuff, and there's no way you're going to get it all done. You figure out what's most important. You just chip away at it all the time, and you just keep.
Well, yeah. And to play devil's advocate, Lee, how many people are thinking about starting a business, not doing it, trying to play it the safe side? They have the same anxiety and the same fear and worries about their position, the new leadership coming in, the acquisition that's going to happen. Like, it's not like it's only entrepreneurs that go through that. It's probably more severe, or more what should I say, like acute. Like you're feeling it more in that, because of all the pressure, and most type A people do it. They're the toughest critics anyway, so you're probably feeling it more there, and you don't have anyone else to blame, that's for sure. But it's not like you don't have that the other way. So to me, it's like, risk if you do, risk if you don't. You got to figure out which. And again, the upside is so much higher. So why wouldn't you want to try to do that? You know what I mean?
At least you can control your own destiny, or at least a good portion of it. It's
Right.
not ever 100% in your control, but you control more of it than if you're working for somebody else.
Right. That's what I think. Yeah.
Great. So tell me a little bit about kind of what's your long-term goal. You mentioned maybe some acquisitions coming up and all. Where are you going? What you going for?
I'm sorry, buddy. The internet connection just broke up. You froze up on me. What was that?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about like what your long-term plans are. What are you aiming for next?
So I've built out the first business built out, well, not my first business, but I had a relatively decent exit of our first insurance business. And I don't regret doing what we did, because there's a lot of things that my family and me included, benefited from that. But I definitely learned that it was the feeling of, celebration, success, or whatever. It wore off really fast. So with this business, when I started Zip, I said, I want to build a business that's attractive for acquisition within 5 years, but I don't ever want to take an investment or make certain business decisions that would require me to sell within that amount of time.
Yep.
So the way I look at it, because I've had, those conversations come up every now and then, especially with, as quickly as we're growing. And I like to, as long as I'm still enjoying what I'm doing, I feel challenged and still working towards that. I don't have an immediate, like, this is what it looks like, I'm going to sell it for X and live on a beach for the rest of my life. That is not, I know how I'm wired, and I'm going to want to start something else. And I'm kind of addicted to being an entrepreneur. And I guess I've come to terms with the fact that I'll know when it's right, if the time's right. I like to say all the time, everything's for sale, not everything's on sale, but right now, like, I don't have any immediate plan to exit. I have specific goals that I want to achieve, and we haven't hit them yet. And I don't think we've met our potential. So we strategically plan our 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and just got done getting through that here a couple months ago. And I have real clear vision of where I want to go. I want to grow this out. organically as best I can. I want to target acquisitions that make sense. And there's a lot of acquisitions to be had, but not all of them make sense. And that's not only financially, but culturally, and somewhat even in our case, geographically, since we're all across the country. And as long as it doesn't impede my ability to be a great husband, great father of my kids, and do that, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing because I'm enjoying it. But in the back of my mind, obviously, I always have that whole what does that look like if that ever happens? But no immediate plans for that. Just want to keep growing it as best I can until I feel like I've met my potential, and I don't think I know what that is yet until I feel it.
So as we start to wrap up, let's circle back a little bit. Go back to 2011 when I first put that message in, you first talked to me. What's your initial impression of me and the business I was running at that point?
Well, first of all, I was just excited to find another guy around my age that was doing the same thing, because I felt like nothing else, I got someone I can bounce ideas off with, or nothing else commiserate with, right?
Yeah,
Because
sharing misery. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's a lot of struggle. I mean, there's there's days where I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this, right? So I was just thrilled to find somebody else, and then obviously figured out we had a couple other things in common. I didn't think anything. I think when I first saw some of the stuff you're doing, the questions you were asking, I was just so excited to be able to provide, some of the things I've learned to somebody else, because I felt so, blessed to have people give me some suggestions and pushing me along. You talked about before we hop on the call or the notes or whatever that, about the amount that you're charging, right? And that's one of the stories I wanted to tell. So I only told you what a guy told me, right? And so I got called out on a job as a Google ad, went down to Charlotte, picked it up, got the whole thing loaded up really quickly. That was our big thing. We wanted to be fast. Yeah. And he came up to me, and I don't remember, he put his arm around me. It was kind of one of those like father to son type talks, where he's gonna tell me, he's like, hey, I just want you to know, he's like, I'm a contractor. I know what you do. I know how much that costs to get rid of. I know how hard that you're working. He's like, you're not charging enough. Yeah. And he goes, you need to raise your prices. And of course, he didn't pay me more for it, but that was the tip. Yeah. And I don't remember what the specific number was, but it was like $200 more than what I was charging for that. And he goes, that needs to be your number. And he's like, and if people aren't willing to pay that, he goes, then don't do it, because it's not worth it. Know your worth. And that's what we got into. I think one of the first questions or first topics that I talk about, what are you charging? How far is your radius? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. I know it was, because I remember when I first started, the very first job I did, I had a pickup truck, and I charged, I think it was either $35 or $50 for a pickup truck load. I think the first job might have been $35 per load. And I went on, and it was just a pickup truck. And I went off, and the job was just right down the road from me. I posted on Craigslist, literally the very first day I posted, this job came through. I went there just by myself. I didn't have any help on this job. And I charged $35 per load. And I think it was 4 loads. I did it in maybe a half a day. Yeah. And I'm like, I just made 120 or 150 bucks or whatever it was, working a half a day. I was used to working at a roller skating rink making $9.50 an hour at that point. Yeah. $12 an hour. It's like 10 or 12 bucks an hour. So I'm like, man, I just earned, it would have taken me 2 or 3 days to have earned what I just made in like 4 hours. So I thought it was a lot of money.
Yeah, that's how I felt too, and I was just trying to survive at that point too. So I was just thankful to have jobs,
Yeah. And then I think by the time I met you, we'd already gotten a trailer, and I know at one point on the trailer load, I charged $195. I don't know if I was at $195 for a trailer load at that point, which would have been about 10 yards or so, 10 or 12. Yeah. It couldn't have quite been 12. It might have been 10 or 12 yards. And might have gone to $250 by the time I met you, but I don't think so. I think I was at $195. And you're like, dude, you're way off. And like you, it was almost a $200 difference. I think I raised it up to $350. And at that point, got junk for a full load on a 15-yard truck. Seems like they were charging something like $450 or something. So we were in line with what they were. And I was nervous as hell when I first did that. I was like, no way anybody's going to pay this amount of money for this amount of work. Sure enough, they did. And I think now we're close to $700 for full load on a 15-yard truck now.
And that makes sense. But I mean, again, the perspectives, like where I'm at now in life, and like think about that, I couldn't at the time wrap my head around the fact that people's time is worth so much more than you give them credit for, and just the hassle of doing it. Right. So I should ask you a question, because this is kind of this is probably my favorite job that I got, just because of how it worked out. Right. And this is where this really started to click about the people's time that was on there. So this was a Saturday. I got a call. There's a guy that lived in is it Myers Park? It's like that fancy, that real bougie place in Charlotte. Is that Myers Park?
Yep, it is Myers Park.
And he goes, hey, I've got, it was 30 cans of paint. 30 cans. That was it. And I said, well, paint's not really something that we really mess with or whatnot. But I'd made friends with the local recycling guy,
yep.
Because he just, saw me hustling, and I just think he liked me, and told me that if I ever came across paint or whatnot, I could drop it off. It's fine. He didn't want to make a big deal out of it. He didn't want me doing it commercially, but if, he got it, he'd prefer me to do that than try to sneak it in the know. Right. Yeah. And so it was a Saturday morning, and I had been out with my buddies that night before, and I wasn't planning on working. And I told him, I was like, well, hey, I can see what I can do. It would probably be Monday before I get there. And he goes, I'll give you $500 if you come down and pick up these cans, because I'm out of this house today. I have to be out.
Yeah.
This house is sold. I have to leave. This is the last thing I have to do. I'll pay you $500 if you'll do it. And I said, I'll be there in 40 minutes, whatever it was. Like, I can't wait to get there and do it. But that's where it clicked me, is like, if you get the urgency, and you get the people whose time this matters in a place like that, $500 to that guy, probably nothing. Yeah. And I talked to him because I wanted to know what he did to live in that house. But that's where it clicked for me. Is like, that's, and looking at what I pay for now and some of the services that we do, it's not that I can't do them, don't want it. It's not even that I don't want to do them. It's my time. Exactly. And that's what people don't put enough value on.
Yep. 100% correct. I know back then there's no way I could fathom paying. At that point, it was, like I said, $350 a load or something. I couldn't fathom paying that amount of money that I was charging. But like now, if I didn't own a junk removal business, let's say I had sold everything off, I didn't have any connections or whatever, and I was moving out of the place, and I had a bunch of stuff, like, if it was a full truckload at $700 or multiple truckloads at 2 or 3, I'd pay $2,000 to be done with it in a day.
Absolutely,
rather than having to try to do this thing on my own.
And I've done that from a referral from you and your group. Like, I've literally done that in 2 moves, same guys that have done it that might hopefully were listening to this. And I've also, I started a laundromat, and we had a bunch of stuff left over from the build out. I hired them to come take everything else that was out of there. And I was thankful that they could just get there and get it done, because I didn't want to deal with it.
So I wish we had more time to go into the laundromat thing, because that's actually curious to me, because I think those are pretty good investments. How many of those do you have? One?
I just started the one. It was mostly, to be honestly, it was a tax purposes. It was last year of Trump's accelerated depreciation, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do when I had that exit. Yeah. And it's one of those things. I'd say the laundromat, like, I mean, it's not completely hands off passive, but it's pretty darn close. And there's a lot of things I could do to make more money with it if I had more time. But I just right now it makes money, but even with the debt service, and I just kind of let it be. And my plan would be to hang on to that, see if I continue to like it. I look at that like a franchise. I'd rather have 2 or 3 versus 1, because then the volume, what should I say, the efficiencies and the just the volume, the metrics, they become a lot more. They just make a lot more sense for like growing an actual business versus being owning your job.
Well, great. Well, we're getting to kind of wrap everything up now.
Yep.
I've asked you several questions. Is there anything that I should have asked that I didn't?
No, I think it's for me. I'm just curious, because I still love this space a lot, and I love what you're doing. I got 3 questions for you. Okay. One, I'll start with this. What was the coolest thing you ever came across when you were doing it yourself and doing junk removal? What was the coolest thing you ever found or had to pick up?
There was a lot of stuff. The thing that comes to top of mind as soon as you mentioned that is I still have this to this day. It's a football that was signed by the Green Bay Packers, the entire team.
Oh, nice.
From Super Bowl II, and it's got like Vince Lombardi's signature and everybody's signature on it, in pretty good shape. And I've had that. That was probably 2014 when I got that. So I've had that thing for 10 or 11 years now.
That's cool.
At the time, I had gotten it appraised. I think it was worth it like $4,000 or something, and I think now it's worth like 12 or 14 or something like that. So that's the neatest thing that I've got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, mine's not that cool. We started working with a transition company right before I sold it, and they had us take out a safe that was bolted into the family wanted to pull the safe out of this closet, and underneath it was a stack of old, crisp as could be $50 bills. and which we immediately let the owner know and took care of it, and they tipped us for it. But I just thought it was, I mean, to me, it's like there's a lot of times where I felt like I was on a treasure hunt. That's what I really liked about it, is like the stuff you come across. All right, so that's coolest. What's the most disgusting or challenging job you ever took that made you question whether you should ever be doing this or not?
Well, if I ever questioned whether or not we should, well, question, do you talk about questioning the business, you talk about questioning the job,
Yeah,
if we should do
yeah.
the job or not.
Or just the most disgusting job?
Most disgusting job. I mean, there's been several of them. One comes to mind. It was an older lady. She was a hoarder, had probably Alzheimer's or dementia, something pretty bad going on. And she lived by herself. Her plumbing had stopped working, and she
Oh
was
no.
literally taking dumps in bags and
Uh,
peeing in jars
yeah.
and go in one particular room, and it was just full of feces and bags of feces and urine. So that was the worst. And coincidentally, we walked in on this lady. We knocked on the door and rang the doorbell, and she just kind of said, "Come in" or whatever. We walk and we open the door, and she's naked. She's completely
Oh
naked without.
no.
So
No.
just had all kinds of issues going on. But we quoted the job and did the work, and that was on my own. That was me and one other guy, and we knocked that job out. But it was definitely disgusting. We've done a lot of work with roaches and mice. That doesn't really bother me. That's definitely the most disgusting job we've done.
Oh, gross. So mine very similar. Is when I first started, I got a job, and I remember the day I didn't have someone help me, so I had to ask if there was anything super heavy that I would need a second person for. They said no, no, it's just a clean out of a space we got out back. So I went out there to go to look at it, and what it was a similar situation, but they had like it's like a little tiny home that was behind their house, and they had I don't know if it was a family member or somebody that had been living there, but was a hoarder, and was in the would throw things out the back window, like just everything. So I had to take care of the house of all the stuff that was in there. Like, and it wasn't very big. It was like bigger, just slightly bigger than a big shed.
Yep.
But it was a pile that, I'm not exaggerating, it was 3 foot high and probably 10 feet across.
Yep.
And there were dead animals in there. And at one point, I don't know if they were diabetic or what, but they were needles. And I had to like be careful because I didn't want to stab myself. Needles. But then as I got to the job, as soon as I showed up, it started pouring. And so the smell and the weight of everything being wet, and then, dead animals and dead, all sorts of gross stuff having to pick it up. And this is just me and my little F-150 in the trailer taking care of it. It took me almost the entire day. And the whole time I was asking myself, like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? All right. Last question I have for you, then we can get going. But you've obviously been successful with all the different things that you've done. What's the one thing that you see like, hey, that's still the thing I want to do? Or what's going to get you to the top of that mountain of saying like, I want to accomplish this before I said I'm done?
Well, this isn't necessarily a must, but I'd love to own a jet. So I'm not one person, I'm not afraid of some people, they're almost embarrassed by wanting aspirations like that, but I want to go around getting that kind of stuff that particular way. To me, a jet is the ultimate freedom. So if you had a jet, you could go in and you could be anywhere that you wanted to go just at the drop of a hat. I mean, that's, or just immediately. And to me, that's something that I strive for. But that's it's really secondarily. There's no timetable on that. And honestly, if it never happened, I wouldn't bother me. But I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's one thing that I'd love to accomplish and always wanted. More than that, I mean, I love flying. I'm a pilot. I'd like to
Yep.
have. There's multiple types of aircraft I'd like to have. I'd like the time to go out and do more just recreational flying than I've got at the moment.
Yeah. No, I knew I was going to, I should have guessed it with the plane.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep. So that's, that's probably not the best answer in the world, but it's
No, that's fair. That's why I want to ask.
Top of my mind when you ask me the question.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that's cool. I mean, mine's going to be similar to, from a business perspective, we're a broker right now. I've always said that I wanted to be at the point where I accomplished becoming an actual carrier, not just a broker on the paper, and doing that from a business perspective. But going back to my everything's for sale and everything's on sale, if I could get to a point where I could exit and own a World of Outlaw team, sprint car team, that would be my thing. I don't have I ran out of talent a long time ago to be good enough to race myself, but we've been sponsoring a couple of cars, and I've been getting more and more involved in the business end of the things that they do there and trying to understand it. That just, to me, like being a part of something like that would just be really, really cool
It's
to hang
funny.
my hat on.
There's a car dealership right down the road from where our office is. I can't quite see it out my window, but as soon as we pull out on the Highway 64, I see it. And for some reason, this particular group outfit has a history. They buy a place, they'll stay in it for a period of time, then they move somewhere else and they leave the building. And I've looked at that building before and I was like, man, I think it would be awesome if it said Godbold Motorsports on it or whatever.
Yeah, I love it.
So, that will I ever do anything like that? I don't know. It would be great. It would be fun. It's not like something that's like on a bucket list that I have to accomplish. But being involved in a race team from the business side, years ago, I've never said, hey, no, I just want to drive. Like I don't want to support somebody else. It's different now. I think I would like to be involved on that as well.
Well, maybe that's what we do. The two of us are going to be a part of this together. I mean, we sponsor 2 sprint cars right now. And Knoxville, I don't know if you've ever, Knoxville Nationals, big sprint cars. Yeah, you got to come out here and visit sometime.
I'd love to. I know Kyle Larson runs that race fairly often, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. Almost every year now. He has been. And thankfully, Joe Gibbs has let Christopher Bell get back into it. So we'll be seeing him hopefully this year. So yeah,
it's like late in the year, isn't it? Like September, October.
It's always August. Yeah, it's right before school starts for us. So, but
I have to do that, man. We might have to connect. I might have to come up there. We'll check that out.
They got a little airport, man. Just fly yourself over here.
Yeah. No, that I think I might message you after this and we can get that set up.
Yeah, I would love
I had one more thing on the business side of things because the jet answer is the first thing that popped into my head. From the business side, I mentioned acquisitions. We started, or I own 3 businesses now, Junk Doctors, which I'm largely just an investor in Junk Doctors now. I'm not really involved in the day-to-day much. We've got the truck body business and we have the marketing company. My primary and the consulting, which is JRA. My primary focus is on JRA, and we've done a lot over the last year and a half of just getting really good at that. And we're continuing to now kind of lay foundations to be able to scale and grow. I want to buy other niche-based marketing agencies. I'd love to build that into $100 million a year business within the next 10 years. So first focusing 100% on waste. We've got junk removal. We're doing a lot of more dumpster stuff now. We're very good at dumpster rental. Continuing to go into the front load space, which front load trash companies, it's a little bit different type of marketing. But basically, if it's anything to do with waste and if it's any type of marketing they need, we want to kind of control that. And then we want to start buying other niche-based agencies. So an agency that focuses on HVAC or plumbing or roofing, or whatever like that, we want to start kind of purchasing that together. And over time, the next 10 years, build up to $100 million a year business. So it's a big vision. And I think you've got to keep pushing and increasing what your vision is and what your goals are, or you become stagnant. And in my experience, I have become stagnant before. And the quality of the work you do goes down. And eventually you start making less money. And this can happen fast. I've never been stagnant for very long, but even just 3 to 6 months, all of a sudden, you look back and you've taken 3 to 6 months, not necessarily off, but you haven't been pushing and you've got a lot of problems in your business at that point. And that's been my experience. So now, like, I never get stagnant. I always make sure, like, if I have a win, I celebrate it just a little bit. But then the next thing is all right, let's set what's next. And I don't want to draw too many racing comparisons here because not everybody that watches, and probably the majority of people that watch this are not race fans. But I always remember Richard Petty used to talk about he would win a race and won 200 of them and 7 championships. Nobody in all the racing's ever won as much on a major series. And they call him the king and all that kind of stuff. But he used to always talk about after he won a race, as soon as the victory lane interview was over, they were already thinking about and talking about the next race. Like, wasn't any large focused on the win that just happened. It's, hey, what's next? And I try and take a similar approach in business.
Well, that's reminds me of Nick Saban, right? Like, he gets on the plane after the national championship. He's already thinking about next year and recruiting, all those things. And I don't want to make it all racing either, but so it's just my mindset. I'm horrible about celebrating. I mean, absolutely horrible about it. I have to, like, be intentional about it because I know other people, it's really important. But, like, I just have this mentality, and it's not a cocky thing at all. It's just, if I'm setting out something I expect to win, I expect to do it. And if we do it, then I'm satisfied that we did it. I don't think, like, pat myself on the back. I don't. It's some sort of mental issue with me probably, but I've always been that way ever since I was a kid. If we win a championship and something's like, well, good, that we were supposed to. Like, what's next? So I've always done that. But it reminds me of Doug. I think it's Doug Wolfgang. I'm pretty sure I'm getting this right. It was a sprint car driver. I'm pretty sure it's him, but he raced, like, I don't know, it was like 150, 160 races one year, and he won 90 of them, 90 plus.
Yep.
And he goes, which one was your favorite to remember? And he said something along the lines like, I remember a lot more of those 70 I lost than I did,
Yeah.
when I won. And that's always been my mentality. That's why we always ask people now when we interview, do you love winning or hate losing more? Because the people who hate losing more than they love winning, those are the people that, I want on my team.
I love that. I love that. I've never actually thought about that, but you're exactly right. I hate losing more than I like winning. That's a
That's
great,
correct.
great analogy there. I thought you were going to say I can't remember who the race car driver was here. They asked him what his favorite win ever was, and he said the next one.
The next one. Yeah, yeah. No, I like that too.
That's a good one.
I like that too.
Well, hey, Zach, man, it's been fun. I appreciate your time on coming on here. We got to talk a little bit about junk removal. Again, guys, this guy right here, like the 20-some people that work for JRA, the 25, 30 people that work for junk doctors, the 8 or 10 people that work for specialty truck bodies, the 50,000 customers that junk doctors has had, the couple hundred clients that JRA's had, the 120 trucks that we've sold, 150 trucks we've sold with STB. Honestly, I can't with 100% certainty say that would have happened if I had not connected with you, which is it's pretty crazy that I know I've never told you this before.
You never
I
told me
would put
that.
it at 50-50, honestly, man. Like I would have put it at 50% chance that I would have abandoned junk and gone off to something else had we not made that connection. So we appreciate that. Let's connect. Let's do the Knoxville Nationals. Let's have a good time. And
Thank you, Lee. That means a lot to me, buddy. And you know what? If it wouldn't have been junk, you would have been successful in something else. But I'm honored and humbled to have been a part of that a little bit. And again, just super proud of what you're doing. And this was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me. And if you ever want to do it again, you know how to get a hold of me.
awesome, guys. Again, Zach Mefferd. And hey, if anybody's looking to start, run, or grow a junk removal business, or if you're in business, you're looking for a truck, make sure you check us out at junkra.com. We are the marketing agency for $1 million plus junk removal and dumpster rental companies. And those that want to get there, if you'd like this video, please thumbs up. Please leave us comments. I know this one is less about junk removal, more about business. It's been a lot of fun. Hope you guys gained some stuff from it. Please subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you the next time. Thanks again.